this evening. We continue our discussions on teachings of Lord Caitanya, and we'll have some kirtan first. Namo Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bharati Vedanta Swami Namo Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bharati Vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sanyapadi Vastutyam Dishasarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sanyapadi Vastutyam Dishasarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Hari Bol Hari Bol Nita Gora Hari Bol Nita Gora Hari Bol Hari Bol Nita Gora Hari Bol Jai Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Jai Prabhupada Prabhupada Jai Jai Prabhupada Shri Shantai Gaura Hari Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Shri Shantai Gaura. So thank you all again so much for joining us this evening. We're continuing our discussions on the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, chapter 17, we'll start with our prayers. Om Jnana-timirandhasya Gnana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri-Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Bhagavatam Tatsvavantam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Te Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunikaya Paschat Veshtarini. So thank you all so much for joining us and also for the opportunity to present this overview on the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. A wonderful book by Srila Prabhupada that's based on the biography of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This biography is called the Chaitanya Charitamrita and it was written by Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. So I pray for all of your blessings to do justice to this class so that we can have a better understanding of the wonderful personality of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of his teachings, his mercy, his mission, and his associates as well. In today's class, we'll discuss his principal associates a little bit, and this is a nice coincidence because today is the appearance day of Srivas Thakur, one of the Lord's principal associates, Panchatattva. We also honor them all in our invocation prayer. This is verse 18, first chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. And the translation is glory to Sri Chaitanya and Nityananda, glory to Advaita Chandra, and glory to all the devotees of Sri Gaura and of Chaitanya. So this chapter 17 we're going to discuss in 3 parts. It's quite a wonderfully long chapter because it's specifically about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his mission. And of course that includes his wonderful associates. And it's called Lord Chaitanya, the original personality of Godhead. So in part 1 today, we will begin following in the footsteps of Kaviraj Krishnadas Goswami. We offer our respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya is described as follows. He is the only shelter for the forlorn, the most fallen, and he is the only hope for those who are completely devoid of spiritual knowledge. Let us try to discuss his great contribution of devotional service. So, the appearance of the most wonderful, merciful Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was probably the best kept secret in history. And this was very important at the time. Well, it's important in all times because human beings have a very strange predilection for declaring themselves as God. Every few years, there's some new incarnation, a new person who's claiming that they can become God, or any one of us can become God. It's not a phenomenon that was confined to the 60s and 70s when Srila Prabhupada was preaching particular against this. Even today, there are New Age preachers who try to make people believe that idea that by some kind of spiritual process, a little bit of meditation here, a little bit of reading there, they'll also be able to realize the divine within them, basically. That means the God within becoming God. So we can imagine then if word was getting out before Lord Chaitanya's appearance that God was scheduled to appear in Navadvip in a Brahmin family and take sannyas. This could easily be imitated by any ordinary person. So there would have certainly been a lot of so-called incarnations at the time. So it was imperative that this wonderful form of the Lord was kept secret. And so we read in the Navadvip Mahatmya by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur that the great personalities of the universe, like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Narada Muni, Parvati Devi, and many other wonderful devotees were made aware of the appearance of the Lord. We know that they also come to assist the Lord in his pastimes. But they all kept it a secret. They were told to keep this confidential so that the word would get out in this way and have it be used as an opportunity for charlatans to pretend to be Lord Chaitanya, which worked very well. But the other consequence is that the Lord's incarnation is still quite hidden even to this day. And even in the wonderful land of India where the Lord appeared, not many people actually know that the Lord is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who actually appeared there, that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that he's the Krishna of Kali Yuga. This age is Lord Chaitanya's age. So we have the good fortune of knowing about him and his mercy and his mission and his teachings through the writings of great acharyas like Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, as well as other contemporaries of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who wrote biographies on him. And we also have the writings of those acharyas who come afterwards in the line of disciplic succession, like Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada. They've all put a lot of love and effort into making the details of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance and activities and teachings known to us. So this is for our benefit to appreciate the extraordinary mercy of Lord Chaitanya in this age, as well as to preach that to others who don't know about it, so that they can also be benefited by his mercy. The supremely powerful Lord Krishna becomes manifest in 5 different features. Although he is one without a second, in order to serve 5 specific spiritual purposes, he becomes manifest in 5 ways. Such diversity is eternal and blissful, in contrast to the conception of monotonous oneness. From the Vedic literature, we can understand that the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, eternally exists with his diverse energies. Lord Chaitanya appeared with full diverse energies, and they are 5 in number. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya is said to be Krishna with diverse energies. So wherever the Lord is present, just like any great person, his energies are there to support his activities, his pastimes, his mission. So we can use the analogy of a statesman, a president, or a king who needs assistance to help him so that his main function, that of ruling the state, is carried out properly. So a king or a president needs to be focused on those activities. They can't very well be spreading their energy on cooking, cleaning, washing, and even driving themselves. But we note that this is an imperfect analogy because such people require the help of others. When the Lord needs to do anything, he doesn't need to depend on anyone else. When he exhibits his pastimes, either in the spiritual world or here, he, out of his own powers, his own energies, can manifest whatever he needs. So these energies, particularly his spiritual, his superior energy, takes that wonderful service of being able to facilitate all the Lord's pastimes, making sure that they happen, but also taking the personalities that the Lord will display his pastimes with. For he does not need any person of this material world. He has his energies of the highest possible character and potential, say, coming directly from him in order to be his principal associates. And with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, these are 5 in number, and they are called, therefore, Pancha. Pancha is 5. Pancha Tattva, the 5 truths. So the Lord, thus being able to manifest various energies for his pastimes, is quite extraordinary, and it's not something that any ordinary person can do. We discussed a few chapters back that the great mystics who have a lot of power at most could possibly make copies of themselves, but that is, of course, a copy that can only do what they can do. So basically an imitation of them that can't have its own personality, that can't have its own abilities and independence to act differently. But with the Supreme Lord, it's very different. His powers are so wonderful that he could create or manifest any number of forms directly of his own qualities, and that is, of course, his incarnations and expansions. That is the energetic, the forms that possess energy. And then there are the different energies, the different powers of himself, and those are separate from the energetic and the energies. And this is so wonderful because all possess their own individual characteristics, but all are also possessing the same basic qualities as him, which is eternity, knowledge, and bliss. So in particular, the Lord's principal associates, they not only assist him here in his pastimes as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but we know that they are his principal associates as well when he is displaying his wonderful pastimes as Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead. So people always misunderstand these potencies, particularly Srimati Radharani and Gopis, taking them to be separate, almost like living entities like us, and not realizing that these are the Lord's personal energies. They're there to serve him in his pastimes, and they take the greatest pleasure in serving him in these pastimes because they are acting in the highest fulfillment of what a potency or a power is. We can take the example that if I have a power to lift something, that power is my power, belongs to me, it's subordinate to me. It is fulfilled by doing what I need it to do. And obviously, if I'm using that power for the highest good or the highest positive purpose, then that power is, if it could be even thought of as a person, that power of lifting is benefited, or we could say even would enjoy the fact that it's being utilized in such a good way to fulfill its purpose. So in the same way, the Lord's energies are like that. They don't want to be engaged in any other purpose besides his service. But we know that there are a lot of ignorant persons who comment very negatively on the Lord in his pastimes with the gopis in particular. But what is interesting is that these same personalities appeared as renunciants in the Lord's pastimes as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Lord himself was a renunciant. Now those same gopis who would dance with the Lord in the rasa dance, they are sitting and discussing the highest spiritual truths and how to benefit all of the universe basically with those truths. So this is why we don't take our understanding and our knowledge from commentators, speculators, academics who don't understand that whether the energies of the Lord are dancing with him in the rasa dance or whether they're sitting with him as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and basically saving the universe of Kali Yuga, they're all completely pure and transcendental and spiritual, and they're not subject to the commentary of people who are ignorant and don't understand. So the Lord manifests all his wonderful energies for the purpose of his pastimes, for the fulfillment of our destiny and happiness and purpose. And this is, of course, in great contrast, Srila Prabhupada says here, to the impersonalist idea that the highest reality in spirituality is oneness. Everything is not different or not diverse, different forms. So we'll address this quite a bit in the text today. There is no difference between the energy and the energetic in regard to the Lord's appearance as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his four associates, Nityananda Prabhu, Advaita Prabhu, Vedadhar Pandit, and Srivas Thakur. Amongst these five diverse manifestations of the Supreme Lord, as the Lord himself and his expansion, that's Nityananda Prabhu, incarnation, that's Advaita Prabhu, devotional energy, Gadadhar Pandit, and devotee, Srivas Thakur. There is no spiritual difference. They are five in one absolute truth. For the sake of relishing transcendental flavors in the absolute truth, there are five diverse manifestations. These are called the form of the devotee, the identity of the devotee, the incarnation of a devotee, the devotional energy, and the pure devotee. So now we take this point where we clarify that the Lord is always present with these diverse energies as separate entities and not as one. But Srila Prabhupada is saying that there's no difference between the energy and the energetic. So how do we understand this? So it's very possible for the Lord and his associates and energies to be different and the same. And this is, of course, alluding to the Lord's explanation of Achintya Veda Ved Tattva, which is one of the important truths that he came to teach us. It means that whereas the Lord always remains separate and supreme amongst all his associates, they can be the same in terms of their purpose. So since the purpose of all the energies are to serve the Lord, even all the Lord's incarnations always serving the purpose of his, that is the purpose being the same. But in particular in the Lord's incarnation as for appearance as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this is more true because the Lord himself was also in the mood of a devotee. So he was also acting for the purpose of serving Krishna, serving himself. And they're also the same in quality. The Lord and his associates are always in eternal bliss and knowledge. And in that way, we understand what the spiritual world is like. The spiritual world is absolute, which means that there isn't a difference. In the material world, everything is relative. So we have things like opposites. But in the spiritual world, everything is the same character. Everything is transcendental and pure. And as we said, eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. And so in the Panchatattva, where everybody is on that level, they are all therefore considered to be the same, even though they are different. Yet, even in the spiritual world, when everyone is the same in terms of quality and purpose, we still have a distinction as to who is the supreme and who are his servants. So in the Panchatattva as well, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was understood to be the Supreme Lord, even though he was taking the form of a devotee, and he was respected as such by his senior associates. Lord Nityananda was his elder brother. Advaitacharya and Srivas Thakur were older than him in age, but they always regarded him as the leader, as the supreme, even if amongst the devotees, as he was appearing as a devotee. So there is always a Supreme Lord, even if we are all the same as him in characteristics. Out of the 5 diversities in the Absolute Truth, the form of Lord Chaitanya is that of the original personality of Godhead Krishna. So we're just going to put up the picture quickly of the Panchatattva. Okay, there we go. So Lord Chaitanya is in the middle on the highest level in yellow. So Srila Prabhupada is saying the key is the original personality of Godhead Krishna. Lord Nityananda is the manifestation of the first expansion of the Lord. So Lord Nityananda is to Lord Chaitanya's right. He's in blue on the second level. Advaita Prabhu, similarly, Advaita Prabhu is the incarnation of the Supreme Lord. So Advaita Prabhu is next to Lord Chaitanya on the lower level in white. So these three, Srila Prabhupada says, Chaitanya, Nityananda, and Advaita belong to the category of Vishnu Tattva, or the Supreme Absolute Truth. So just as Lord Chaitanya is who is Krishna himself, Lord Balaram is appearing as Lord Nityananda, and Lord Narayan is appearing, Lord Mahavishnu is appearing as Advaitacharya. So they are in the category of the energetic, the ones who possess the energy. And so they are therefore different. They have their own category called Vishnu Tattva, because they have the characteristics of Vishnu Tattva, of the Lord. Now, the energies are on the Lord's left. Srivas represents the pure devotee, and he's wearing orange on the Lord's left on the lowest level. And Gadadhar represents the internal energy of the Lord for the advancement of pure devotion. So Gadadhar Pandit is wearing red on Lord Chaitanya's left. Therefore, Gadadhar and Srivas, although on the Vishnu platform, as we explained, that platform is the same in quality, the eternity, knowledge, and bliss. They are dependent, diverse energies of the Supreme Lord, which means, Srila Prabhupada says, in other words, they are not different from the energetic, which is the one who possesses the energy. Because if I possess energy, if I possess the energy to lift something, when that energy to lift is lifting up something, that energy is doing it, but it's doing it as I'm doing it. that energy can't do it on its own. It doesn't have that ability. So the energy is always dependent on the one who possesses the energy, even though both, it could be said, are acting in the same way, since the energetic acts through the energy. And Prabhupada continues, but they are manifested diversity for the sake of relishing transcendental relationships. So we will explain this a bit more with an analogy. We've understood clearly that Vishnu Tattva is a separate category, having all the qualities of Krishna. But the energy, although coming from the source, has the same properties, but the energy is dependent on the source for its existence. It can't exist on its own, not the way the Lord can exist on his own without us, for example. So the analogy that we use is that of the power station. We have a power station that is able to supply any amount of power, and it can supply great amounts of power to very large factories, and it can also supply small amounts of power to houses. So in the same way, as the categories of energy supplied are different, the energies that the Lord has are also in different categories. The energy that we need for a large factory is not needed for powering a small house. So in the same way, the Lord has a superior energy, and that energy is called the Antaranga Shakti. And that energy is identical with the Lord, has all his powers, basically. The Lord manifests himself in that way. And the personification of that Antaranga Shakti, that superior energy, in its highest degree is Srimati Radharani. So Srimati Radharani, from the class of the superior energy, is represented in the Panchatattva by Gadadhar Pandit. So the Lord also has another class of energy that is much smaller, because this energy doesn't have to perform the wonderful pastimes and activities of the superior energy. These smaller energies are called Tatastha Shakti, and basically they are the jivas, they are the spirit souls. And these jivas are personified in the Panchatattva by Srivas Thakur, who is an incarnation of Narada Muni. Narada Muni is a jiva like us, but unlike us, he is not in illusion. He has achieved the perfection of bhakti in his realization of pure devotional service. And so acting on that platform, he is acting on the Vishnu platform, as Srila Prabhupada explains it, of complete knowledge, bliss, and eternity. And because of that, we have said before, which is going to be our theme throughout this class, that he is therefore the same as the Lord, although not one with him. He's the same in this quality. So this is quite clear then. What's the difference between the Lord as the energetic, the one who possesses the energy, and his energies who are personified? So they're personified as his superior energy, Radharani, and the gopis, for example, and then us as the jivas, the Tatastha Shakti. We're also called the marginal energies, because we're sort of on the margin in between the Lord's superior energy and his inferior energy. So he also has an inferior energy. So whereas the spiritual energy is responsible for, or the spiritual energy is present and runs everything in the spiritual world, we could say. So we have the inferior energy that runs everything in the material world. And this inferior energy is called Bahiranga Shakti. So there are further subdivisions in these classes of energies, but basically they're all functioning in order to carry out the purposes of the Lord to please him. That's the purpose of us existing. It is said, although we know that time is eternal in the spiritual realm, so there isn't an actual point in time when we all become manifested from the Lord. But for us to understand, since we only have the concept of linear time, it is said that the Lord desired to become many. So we all manifested from him. And therefore, people mistake that since we come from the Lord, that we must be able to go back and become the Lord. But that's never possible because we understand now that the energy can never be the same as the energetic. The energetic always has their properties, but the energies, just as much as my power of lifting, can't say that it is me. It doesn't have all my other powers. It doesn't have my complete abilities. It doesn't have the personality that I am or the totality that I am. And in the same way, all living entities are not possessing the totality of what is Vishnu Tattva. So in that way, not in any other point in time can those energies ever become the same as the energetic of the one that possesses them. So because of that, we have the wonderful example of Sri Radha to learn from, so that we don't get deluded by this thought of wanting to become one with God. Srimati Radharani possesses, we could say, more of the Lord's energy than any one of us does, being in the most superior personality of his superior energy. But she never ever tries to become Krishna. Srimati Radharani fulfills the purpose of Krishna's energies in serving him in the best, most wonderful, most pure, most extraordinary way possible. And because of doing that, Krishna is actually so subordinate to this love of hers that he actually becomes subordinate to her, basically. So she's not setting out to do this. She's not setting out to become greater than God, but by that power of her love. So we realize that since we are the Lord's power, it is particularly this power of love that we have to express for him that we possess. We could consider this even as the God principle, the real God principle, the fact that we can have pure love for Krishna. And since that principle is him expressed in us, it is most attractive to him. And as much as Lord Krishna gives himself to Sri Radha and her associates with their pure love, anybody who associates with Krishna in pure love also gets him. He happily and willingly gives himself to his pure devotees who express unalloyed love for him. So this is quite esoteric, and this is what foolish people don't understand when they're constantly trying to compete with God to become God. That the actual, you could say, the power of the living entity is in loving God purely. So we will continue. All right. The whole process of devotional service involves the transcendental reciprocation of the flavors of relationship between the worshipper and the worshipped. Without such diverse exchange of transcendental flavors, devotional service has no meaning. So the beauty of this relationship that we have with Krishna, our energetic and us being the energies, is that Krishna has so many unlimited forms, as we've discussed before, and we, jivas, and all other energies of the Lord are unlimited. So when the energies and the energetic are engaged in loving relationship, there are innumerable transcendental flavors of love that can be shared. And anyone can understand this because even in the material world, we have so many different relationships with people. And when those relationships are expressed very nicely, then we see so many different aspects of love and happiness. So this is what Bhakti is facilitating. Bhakti is the actual love that we are sharing as the servitors of the Supreme Lord. And this allows all these flavors to come out in our relationships. In the Vedic literature, the Katha Upanishad, it is stated that the Supreme Lord is the supreme living entity among all living entities. There are innumerable living entities, but there is one living entity who is the supreme absolute Godhead. The difference between the singular living entity and the plural living entities is that the singular living entity is the Lord of all. Lord Chaitanya is that supreme living entity, and he descended to reclaim the innumerable fallen living entities. This famous verse that Srila Prabhupada is referencing here, he quotes quite a lot and he explains very nicely. Nitya Nityanam Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman Tam Atmastam Ye Nupashyanti Kiras Yesham Shanti Shashvati netaresham. So it's very clearly explaining that there's one nityo, one eternal, as Sri Prabhupada says, living entity, and nityananam, many other eternal living entities. And Chaitanya, one supreme living principle, and Chaitanana, amongst the other innumerable living principles. And this one ego, supreme living entity, living principle, is maintaining all the others. Bahunam yo vidadati kama. So that makes it abundantly clear. And this Upanishad, of course, is considered part of the Vedic canon. And so we realize that the Vedic literature then is stating that there is one Supreme Lord, that none of these other living entities is supreme with that Lord or can become supreme with that Lord, because that one Supreme is maintaining all the others. And it also means that there isn't a formless entity that we could actually just merge into, for example, because it states clearly that there is one supreme living principle. So the importance in this age is that the supreme living principle that is maintaining all the living entities has also descended to reclaim all the living entities out of his great mercy. He has extended the meaning of his name. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was given quite aptly one of the names in his youth as Vishwambar, the maintainer of the universe. So the maintainer is also maintaining us by getting us out of the universe, to maintain us in the spiritual atmosphere that is actually most comfortable for our natures, that of the spiritual world. In other words, the specific purpose of Lord Chaitanya's advent was to establish in the present age the Vedic fact that there is one Supreme Personality of Godhead predominating and maintaining all the other innumerable living entities. Because the impersonalist Mayavadi philosophers cannot understand this, Lord Chaitanya advented himself to enlighten the people in general about the real nature of the relationship between the Supreme and the many dependent living entities. So we really need Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to rescue us from this understanding, because we have been in this material world for so long that we only have an understanding that this is our home, and that because we only have the concept of this being the only reality, we struggle so much to make a success of it. It's really imperative for that living entity to feel like in this place that it thinks is the only reality, that it's able to achieve whatever it wants to, which is, of course, the need to control. All living entities have this propensity because they are using their independence in that way. And Prabhupada says that this is a misuse of that independence. And independence is an important and intrinsic property of a living entity, as much, we could say, as its nature of being eternal and full of knowledge and bliss. Because without having a sense of independence, then the relationship between Krishna and the living entity wouldn't be servitude, it would be one of slavery. One has to have a sense of independence so that we can choose to serve the Supreme Lord and thus fulfill the purpose for which we exist. And when we choose to not be under his control, to experience what it's like to be under our own control, then we choose against him. And the only way that we can exercise that choice is to come to an existence that is opposite to him. In his realm, everything is of his nature, eternal, blissful, and knowledge. For us to be able to be existing in a way that is independent of him, we have to come to a place that's opposite, that's temporary, that's miserable, that is full of ignorance. So someone could cry foul that we should have the same opportunity as the Lord in the spiritual world, but we're choosing against him. It's like the analogy of us wanting to heat a room, but bringing in a cooler, an air conditioning unit, and putting it on cool and expecting the room to get hot. We can't expect an opposite result from such a thing. So in the same way, we can't want to have all the qualities of Krishna, but be without Krishna. So when we come to this material world to exhibit our own control, we don't get to have all the benefits of being under Krishna's control. That is, being in a spiritual realm, which is eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. We have to take what we get in this place. So the problem is that we don't understand that this is a stage for us to realize that we're not in control of anything. Because if we think about it, we aren't. Not only through our frustration, we're trying to um, not have good control, even our own mind and senses, our own bodies, what to speak of control over other people and in the greater circumstances, workplaces, or even nations. We can't control what happens in the universe at all. And that's a very good thing, considering our predilection for making mistakes, for things like corruption, strikes, and so on. We can't imagine if we were in charge of rising the sun every day, or making sure the moon moved through the constellations properly, or making sure that where rain was needed would fall, or things like that. The living entity is completely incapable of handling such things. Like we said, what to speak of all the smaller things. And the nice example that His Holiness Gaura Swami Maharaj gave was that of a child that wants to cook. There's a small child who's very impressed by the mother being able to turn out wonderful dishes in the kitchen and wants to be able to do the same. The mother understands that this child is not able to have control over things like cooking over gas or fire, electricity, working with sharp knives, and so on. But if the child is insistent, the mother will give the child some sort of play instruments in order to appease themselves in a controlled environment. So this is our controlled environment. And it's not even under the material nature's control. Even the material nature is not able to work without the Lord. So he's still behind the scenes, supplying the power and supplying the control over this universe so that everything runs properly. But so that it runs properly for us to understand that we're not successful at control. That's what the whole thing is supposed to make us realize, that we get to this point of being frustrated with our attempts, our ineffective attempts to control ourselves or anything else. And we understand that our purpose then is eternal servitude to the Lord. This is the nature of our souls. The problem is when people get frustrated with this idea of control and they don't understand that then reality is turning to servitude of God, because they would see that that frustration in this material world means that there must be a reality that's opposite to this world of form. They take it that when scripture describes Krishna having a Brahman feature that is of no form, that must be a higher reality, since form leads to so much of frustration and is in this material world full of ignorance and it's temporary and miserable. So the Lord's form, the Lord's aspect of being formless must be where bliss and happiness and eternity is. But they haven't understood then that they are the servants of God. So in that conclusion, it is that they want to exercise their control by becoming God. So this is their natural conclusion. So through knowledge, through yoga, through many different Vedic processes, they try to free themselves of the material body, as well as that includes the subtle body, the mind, intelligence, false ego. And so at the time of death, their soul will be able to attain the formless God, and they think that this will lead them to that eternal peace and happiness that they're looking for. So as much as we understand their frustration, they're not going to achieve that which they're looking for, because they can't remain in that light, that impersonal Brahman, because they can't become one with it. We've already explained that their nature is not the same as Brahman to ever become one with it. And so it's only for a very short period of time that they can, relatively short period of time that they can remain there before they have to come back down to the material world again. So the fact that they can never actually become one with Brahman, Krishna makes abundantly clear in many places, but particularly in Bhagavad Gita, we have this famous verse from chapter 2, text 12, where he says, Natva ivaham jatu nasam, natvam neme janadipaha, nachaiva na bhavishyamaha, sarve vayam ataha param. Never was there a time when I did not exist. Nor you, Krishna speaking to Arjuna, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So this is abundantly clear. As we said, although we did come from the Lord, this is not something we can understand in terms of linear time. So we accept that in eternal time, although we come from Him, we're always existing separately from Him. As he says here, never a time when we did not exist backwards, and also in the forwards, in the future. there's never a time when we will be able to, where we will stop existing and become one with him. He says, never in the future shall any of us cease to be. So although this is very clear, and Krishna has made other statements that are very clear in Bhagavad Gita to this end, there's still the tendency of people to twist the Lord's words to suit themselves. So we read on about this. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's last instruction is that everyone should give up all other engagements and render devotional service unto him. But after Krishna's disappearance, less intelligent people misunderstood him. They became contaminated with Mayavad philosophy, which produced so many mental speculators that people forgot the actual position of the absolute truth and the living entity. Therefore, Lord Sri Krishna himself, as Lord Chaitanya, again appeared in order to teach the fallen souls of this material world the way to approach Lord Krishna. The Bhagavad Gita teaches that one should give up everything and be done with this world of material attachment. A pure devotee of Lord Krishna and one who follows the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya are one and the same. Lord Chaitanya's philosophy is that one should give up everything and worship God, Krishna. Krishna as the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, spoke the same words, indicating himself as the Supreme Lord, but the Mayavadi philosophers misunderstood him. So these philosophers have a very unfortunate understanding of Bhagavad Gita. For many of them say that when Krishna is speaking and saying aham, or mam or me, when he's referring to basically I, me, or mine, that Krishna is referring to an unborn within him, that it is this unborn that's speaking through Krishna. So this is a huge fallacy, we understand immediately, because why can't Brahman, if it's so superior, speak for itself? We understand in the Christian literatures the story of how the Lord appeared and spoke through a burning bush, but nobody actually worshipped the bush afterwards. Everybody understood, or the Lord asserted himself as God without a form. So how come it is here that Brahman cannot assert itself and speaks as if it is Krishna? We also need to ask the question that why would Brahman not be able to do its own work? Why would it have to need someone else to do what it wants if it was supreme? As well as why Krishna? Since everyone is equal apparently, if they become Brahman realized, why not Brahma? Why not Shiva? Why not any Brahman realized person? There's so many other scholars throughout time, throughout the ages, who have also been quite capable, if by the Mayavadi standards, of speaking Bhagavad Gita, to the point where Krishna's, Srila Prabhupada said so many times, why Krishna's Bhagavad Gita? Why not speak their own Bhagavad Gita or their own literature that is able to carry the same message as Bhagavad Gita? So if we consider all of that, we understand that obviously this kind of Brahman is actually not superior to Krishna if it needs Krishna to do something. And so we figure that it must be subordinate to Krishna, in which case it fits in completely with the real understanding of Brahman, which is that it is subordinate to Krishna, that it is just his effulgence, that Krishna alone possesses his form, his effulgence, and his personality. And so it is him indeed who is speaking the Bhagavad Gita and who is advising us to surrender to him so that we can achieve our original position, which will make us happy and free us from this material world. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya, to clarify the situation, reiterated Lord Krishna's message. One should not declare himself to be as good as Krishna, but should worship Krishna as the Supreme Lord. So unlike the Mayavadis thinking that Brahman needs someone else to speak through, when Krishna wants to speak, he comes himself. So even though there have been wonderful teachers and spiritual personalities, including the Lord's own incarnations and expansions like Lord Nityananda and Lord Advaitacharya around on the planet, Krishna came himself, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he clarified his message of Bhagavad Gita, his message of Srimad Bhagavatam, his message to the Vedas for everybody to understand. So this is our fortune in being able to appreciate what he came to teach us, and also to spread those teachings so that we can root out these great fallacies in the form of impersonalist teachings, which are quite detrimental to spiritual futures of people. So we will continue with part 2 tomorrow, next week. Sorry. Thank you all so much for your kind attention. Shri Shri Gaura Hari Ki Jai, Shri Shivas Thakur Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai, Shri Shri Gaura. Are there any questions or comments or anything that I could clarify?
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. Very, very wonderful class.
Thank you for service.
No questions from my side. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Matsuri. Hare Krishna. If there are no questions or comments, we will sing this very nice bhajan, Ohe Vaishnava Thakur. So in the last week, the wonderful servant of Srila Prabhupada, is called Niskaramakram Swami, left this world but did not leave us. As he, as well as his legacy, his teachings, his kirtan that will always be with us. So we will honor him and the wonderful associate of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Srivas Thakur, with this bhajan. By Bhaktivinoda Thakur. O he Vaishnava Thakura, Doyara Sagara, Erase Koruna Kori. O he Vaishnava Thakura, Doyara Sagara, Erase Koruna Kori. Diya Parajaya, Sharae Amaya, Tumara Charana Gori. Diya Parajaya, Sharae Amaya, Tumara Charana Gori. Jaya Bhegadami, Jaya Dosha Shori, Jaya Guna Devodase. Jaya Bhegadami, Jaya Dosha Shori, Jaya Guna Devodase. Jaya Satsanga Dehoe Amare Bosachi Sangera Anshe. Jaya Satsanga Dehoe Amara Bosachi Sangera Anshe. Ekaki Amara Nahi Parabala Hari Rama Sankirtan. Ekaki Amara Nahi Parabala Hari Rama Sankirtan. Tumi kripa kori shradha bindu diya deho Krishna nama dhane. Tumi kripa kori shradha bindu diya deho Krishna nama dhane. Krishna se tumhara Krishna de paro tumhara raksha diya. Krishna se tumhara Krishna de paro tumhara raksha diya. Amito Ganga Krishna Krishna Boli Daita Papate Pavachi. Amito Ganga Krishna Krishna Boli Daita Papate Pache. O He Vaishnava Thakura Hara Sadara Eda Shri Koruna Hori. O He Vaishnava Thakura Dayara Sagara Eda Shri Koruna Hori. Diya Pada Jaya Shara Maya Tamara Charana Dori. Diya Pada Jaya Shara Maya Tamara Charana Dori. Jaya Vaishnava Jaya Vaishnava Jaya Vaishnava Thakur 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 Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Gurudev Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Jai Godhead ki jai, Shri Panchatattva ki jai, Shri Srivas Thakur ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Swamis Brahmakrana Swami Maharaj ki jai, Shri Jai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. So we'll read the translation. O Venerable Vaishnava, devotee of Krishna, O ocean of mercy, be merciful unto your servant. Give me the shade of your lotus feet and purify me. I hold on to your lotus feet. Teach me to control my 6 passions, rectify my 6 faults, bestow upon me the 6 qualities, and offer unto me the 6 kinds of holy association. I do not find the strength to carry on alone the Sankirtan of the holy name of Hari. Please bless me by giving me just 1 drop of faith with which to obtain the great treasure, the holy name of Krishna. Krishna is yours. You have the power to give him to me. I am simply your servant running behind you, shouting, Krishna, Krishna. So we have the explanation of the 6 passions, the 6 faults, and the 6 holy associations. The 6 passions are those pertaining to words, to the mind, anger, the tongue, the stomach, and the genitals. The 6 faults are overeating, attachment to material things, inability to follow regulative principles, sense gratification, useless idle talk, and impure habits. The 6 positive qualities are enthusiasm in practicing devotional service, firm faith in devotional processes, a strong desire to attain prema bhakti, a favorable service attitude, avoidance of non-devotees, and appreciation of the company of devotees. And the 6 methods of association are to go in an assembly of devotees, to invite devotees into one's home, discuss and hear devotional topics, to take the Mahaprasad of devotees, and to offer Mahaprasad to devotees. So we remember these principles are explained in the first few verses of the Nectar of Instruction, by Srila Rupa Goswami. So again, thank you all so much for joining us, and please join us next week when we continue discussions on this chapter 7. Kishantai, Godhari ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Hare
Mataji.
Krishna.